A Bleacher Report trade that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about it. It's the Hoops Nerd Show. All right, guys, like always, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also, thank you for all the support and just being, I don't know, not saying too many mean things about my face, but it's healing. It will be done soon. I appreciate it. So, anyways, this comes from Andrew Bailey. By the way, former SLC Dunk writer Andrew Bailey for Bleacher Report has a trade that I thought was really interesting, and I wanted to just react to this. This is a trade that involves the Utah Jazz and the Golden State Warriors. And let's just get into it. Here's the trade. So the Golden State Warriors would receive Lauri Markkanen and John Konchar. Yes, another Lauri Markkanen trade from the Hoops Nerd channel. Just deal with it, okay? Utah Jazz, what they would receive in this trade is Jimmy Butler, Yaxel Lendeborg, and first-round picks in 28, 30, and 2032. Now, first things first is everyone's going to react. You have an injured Jimmy Butler and a rookie in Yaxel Lendeborg that had an incredible summer league, but in the end, it is just summer league. We don't know for sure what it'll look like come the regular season with Lendeborg. For Utah, they give Lauri Markkanen to the Golden State Warriors, a player that the Warriors have been trying to get for years, kind of like what happened with Walker Kessler, a player the Lakers tried to get for years and finally gave the Jazz what they asked for. In this situation, this would likely be exactly what the Jazz wanted. You look at what the Jazz wanted before when there were trade rumors with the Warriors and the Jazz, and it was a young player and multiple picks, 2 to 3 picks. So this actually fits exactly what the Jazz would have been asking for Lauri Markkanen. I love this trade. I love this trade. And let me explain why. Now, Lauri Markkanen is a really good player, and he's worth those picks and the young player in Yaxel Lendeborg, who looks like one of the steals of the draft, if we're being honest, with how well he played in Summer League. His first game, he shoots 6 for 6 from 3, and he helped lead the Golden State Warriors to the Summer League title. He was incredible. Jimmy Butler is a player that's injured, so you're obviously getting a guy coming off of a bad, I believe it was Achilles injury or ACL. Either way, he's coming off a very serious leg injury. Probably not going to contribute very much next season, or at least at a high level. It usually takes a few years for those things to get better. Now, here's why I would do it. Utah now has their cornerstone star in Darren Peterson. He is the player the Jazz have tanked for, and he has shown in Summer League that he has everything you could want. He answered every question the Jazz had. The biggest question was, can he stay healthy? And yes, he did. Would he get his burst back? Yes, he does. I think he wore down a little bit as Summer League went on, but if you watched him in Salt Lake City Summer League, you saw a player that looks like an absolute superstar, and that's a player that the Jazz are going to want to build around. Utah has to make some decisions, though, because this upcoming season is going to be the final year for Keontae George's contract situation, and he's going to have to, if he plays extremely well, the Jazz are going to have to give him a big contract. That's just going to be the case. Utah already has 2 big contracts in Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. as well. It is partly why Utah was probably okay making the Walker Kessler trade, because they got an incredible return, and we're still able to fill that spot with league average play. Now, Lauri Markkanen has been an all-star in the past. The last 2 seasons, though, he has not hit league average from 3. He has not been a good defender, and there would be some that maybe say, well, he wasn't trying particularly hard, or he wasn't being asked to play hard, and maybe that's the case. I don't know why he can't hit league average from 3 consistently, and it does make me wonder if there are things with his body that will break down as the season goes on this upcoming season. I don't know, but I do think it's legitimate question marks at times with Lauri Markkanen, who may break down. Now, he might be fine. Might be fine. And if he's fine, the Warriors are going to be happy. For Utah, they replace him with Axel Lendeborg, who can then come off the bench. And what it does is it puts Ace Bailey into the starting unit and allows him to have that spot at small forward. There is no issue with playtime and who should start and who should not start. And Utah avoids that problem altogether. And knowing that Lauri Markkanen is not a very good defender, you put in Ace Bailey, who has shown great defensive upside, and in the short time he was in Summer League, showed incredible defensive play again. And you put him at the wing at the 3 in his natural position, and it fits completely perfectly. Something that wouldn't been quite an easy fit with Lauri Markkanen. Markkanen's more of a power forward who would be playing the 3 with this team. In that situation, you have Ace Bailey at the 3, gets the start, and Lendeborg comes off the bench. And his passing, by the way, is great and would help answer some of the questions maybe the Jazz have with getting some passing on the floor when you have either Keyonte George or Darren Peterson by themselves running the point, right? Because Utah is going to start Keyonte George with Darren Peterson, but they are likely going to have to change. They're going to have substitutions, and they're going to want to have Darren Peterson and Keyonte George on the floor at all times, which means that one of them will be the only point guard on the floor. It would be nice to have someone like Axel Lendeborg who can move the ball with that offense, something that Lauri Markkanen has just not been able to do very well. Just not a very good passer either. What Lauri Markkanen is good at is shooting the ball and driving to the basket, finishing in transition. He showed a little bit in isolation and things like that. He is not a lot else. So he is basically a 7-foot Klay Thompson. The only thing is he is also not an off-the-bounce three-point shooter. So he's almost solely a catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. And so that type of production, if Axel Lendeborg gets on the floor, and he can recreate that off the bench for sure. And Ace Bailey absolutely is a more dynamic, potentially more dynamic offensive player than what we've seen from Lauri Markkanen. The other, I've talked about it already, it is a contract situation that you have to be cognizant of. Utah will have Jaren Jackson Jr. With a big contract. They will have upcoming contracts for Keyonte George, which would allow them to sign Keyonte George pretty easily, and they would have a very clear cap room on this team. Now, you have Jimmy Butler on the Jazz at this point, and I think that Utah could then move him to another team. And the other team that I think might be interested, and this is obviously pie in the sky, but I think that if you give a call to the Milwaukee Bucks, they might be interested in Jimmy Butler. He can go to the Milwaukee Bucks. By the way, he played college basketball at Marquette in Wisconsin. Maybe Jimmy Butler would be someone they'd be interested in. Utah could potentially flip Jimmy Butler for someone like Miles Turner. Solid rim protection, can shoot the three-point shot, and allow the Jazz to play a 5-out offense, something that Will Hardy has wanted to do for a long time. It would unlock even more of the skill set of Keyonte George and Darren Peterson with a player like Miles Turner at the center spot. It would allow Yusuf Nurkic to be on the bench and dominate bench units. They could split those minutes up to keep both those players fresh. It makes a lot of sense. And then just to get 3 unprotected first-round picks from the Golden State Warriors is incredible. And those picks would come post Steph Curry. And by the way, the team that, and probably the fans that say no to this trade, is most likely the Golden State Warriors. Why? Because of those picks. Those will be post Steph Curry. Now, there is a scenario where the Warriors do something like this with the Jazz. Why? Because we have been getting little hints and rumors about Steph Curry potentially being willing to play somewhere else. And what that tells me is that more than likely, Steph Curry's team and representation and everyone behind the scenes might be putting some pressure on the Golden State Warriors to do something, or he may move on. And they absolutely want Steph Curry to retire as a Golden State Warrior. So if they can get Lauri Markkanen to play with Steph, Markkanen in his prime can play next to Steph Curry, can spread the floor and do some things and help that team be at least interesting and fun to watch, they may be willing to do a trade like this. And then Utah gets these picks post Steph Curry. These picks being potentially great would be unbelievable. And then Utah can either just make the picks with these picks, or they can combine these picks with the trade they made with the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Jazz all of a sudden have the most trade currency in the NBA. And just a reminder that you can never have too many of these picks. Utah would then be in perfect position to either strike if there's a superstar available to pair with Peterson and George and Triple J, or they can just make those picks, because you never know when one of those hits, and then you add just another young star. And Utah, with these picks, would then have constant depth with youth, which is going to become the most important thing for these teams down the road, because Utah and all of these other teams has to have their team filled with depth, and not just depth, but youth. That depth needs to be young, because one, they are going to be less likely to be injured, more likely to play more often, will play fast, less likely to get worn down. But two, they will be cheaper. You get picks in the middle of the first round and you find players that can play in that area, you are getting players that have cheaper contracts that contribute, and you will be having a team that can last and contend for a much longer window. And finally, everyone who has been against this trade has said that, well, the Jazz will just be rebuilding forever. Well, what if Yaxel Lendeborg shoots the three ball better than Lauri Markkanen and moves the ball a little bit better? And what if the Jazz have a better defensive team after moving Lauri Markkanen? There's a world where just by moving Markkanen and replacing him in the aggregate, like they say in Moneyball, you have a better team, because you are improving those weaknesses that come with a player like Lauri Markkanen, who is a really good player, but there are some faults that are hard to overcome. And we'll see. One last thought. It's probably something to think about, but Jaren Jackson Jr. signing with the Jazz, apparently Walker Kessler was not happy about that. And I wonder if Lauri Markkanen was also not happy about that. Maybe he was fine with it. I'm sure we've seen quotes where he was fine with it. But they do play pretty much the same position, the power forward. And if Utah's bringing on Jaren Jackson Jr., what is the thing that he can do better than anything? It's defend. He can shoot the three and defend, can play off of a center, will help the Utah Jazz defense be much better. That might be the thing that the Jazz are worried about the most, is improving the defense, improving the athleticism at every position, while also being able to score. Utah has a chance to make some really incredible trades this year, guys. I don't know if something like this would happen. More than likely, the Golden State Warriors would not do this, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Jazz said yes to something like this. This is actually an incredible trade for the Jazz. I would do it in a heartbeat, because this makes too much sense for Utah. You get even more assets while still being very competitive and honestly being a playoff team. Guys, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Shout out to the All-Stars and the members. I appreciate you so much. I will talk to you next time.